Okay, so this is chapter 9, video 3 on adolescence. As soon as you're done taking notes here, go ahead and take the quiz 3. All right, so far we've looked at stages of development in the womb. So from conception to birth, where we start looking at Piaget stages of cognitive development. It kind of took us through elementary school into middle school, and now we're going to pick up with adolescence, which is where you guys are now. It's the transition period from childhood into adulthood. Right? This is marked by puberty. So that's how you know when you've reached adolescence. Puberty is defined as the period of sexual maturation during which a person becomes fully capable of reproducing. The onsets of puberty is generally between the ages of 11 and 14. So this is where your sex organs are maturing. I'm not going to go into too much detail there because between health class, biology, and talk from your parents about the birds and the bees, you should know what that is. It has important implications for the way that you feel about yourselves as adolescents. And self image can be greatly affected by when you start to physically mature. All right. Your cognitive development, we know from learning about Piaget that by the time you're 12, 13 years old, you've reached that formal operational stage. So that's where you are cognitively at the start of your adolescence. So this is where you begin to reason hypothetically, deduce consequences. So higher level thinking, you're thinking more abstractly. This leads to greater understanding and comprehension of very broad moral principles, and I'm going to get to morals in a second. So you do have the ability to reason here because you're in the formal operational stage. However, the reasoning is still during this age tends to be self-focused, and you assume that your experiences are unique, and that has to do with something totally different from Piaget. That has to do with Erikson. We're going to talk about him in a second. So first, let's go back to morality. All right, your morals. Lawrence Kohlberg and his stage of morality, you're going to need to know him. All right, so for this unit, definitely 3 people to know are Piaget, well, 4 people to know. Piaget, Vygotsky, Kohlberg, and then we're going to talk about Erikson. So Kohlberg, he believed that moral reasoning helps guide your judgments and behavior. He proposed dilemmas are things that help you reason at different levels. This theory assumes that people move through the levels of morality that we're going to talk about in a fixed order, right? There's no real ages that match up with these levels, so you could go through them really at any age. However, it is believed that you could not reach the highest level of moral development until you're at least 13. And if you think about it, that makes sense because cognitively, you're not fully developed and in that formal operational stage and able to think higher level until you're 13. So, how could you fully develop morally, like this concept of right and wrong, before the age of 13? You can't. All right, so basically, you can go through the first 2 stages, but you haven't mastered that third stage of morality until at least 13 when you're fully cognitively developed. Um, so again, helping people move through these levels by posing moral dilemmas to solve. We'll go through this in class. I'll pose a moral dilemma situation to you, and based on your responses, we'll see which level of Kohlberg's morality stages you're at. So his stages of morality were these 3 I just put up here: pre-conventional, conventional, and post-conventional. Shouldn't be too hard to memorize, right? All right, so make sure you get down all 3 of these, and I'm going to walk you through each 3 and what they mean. All right, pre-conventional morality. This is where morality, so your sense of right and wrong, is based off of your own self-interest. Your actions are either to avoid punishment or to gain reward. It's selfish and self-centered. Usually, this is where young children are, right? So young children, so like the child development kids, when we bring them up, they're going to be in the pre-conventional stage of morality mostly. All right, basically what they do in their concept of what's right and wrong, for the most part, is probably to avoid some type of punishment or gain some type of reward. The next, and you have to master that first before you get to this next one, conventional morality. It's where now you're going beyond your like selfish needs and you're starting to you want to please others. So your morality is based on obeying the laws to either maintain social order and or gain social approval, right? So that's your conventional morality. And finally, your post-conventional morality. This is where higher reasoning is used to guide your behavior. Morality is based on your own ethical principles, so your personal views on justice, equality, basic human rights, things like that. Kohlberg actually argued, and he thought that many people didn't actually reach this level of reasoning because it's so higher level. So it goes beyond like formal operational stage of thinking. Like you have to really be on it and have a sense of like empathy and everything. I would argue to make this make sense. Uh, and I'm kind of bashing Kanye West here, but Kanye West could be case in point to why Kohlberg thinks that people haven't really not many people have met this stage of morality yet. Because personally, I think he's a good example of someone who has not met that stage of morality yet. So talk is cheap. How do we learn to put this type of how do we learn to put our sense of right and wrong, our morality into action? Well, first of all, we have to teach empathy. All right. So teach uh, children to feel for others and other perspectives and take them out of that selfish role. Um, and also teach self-discipline and delay gratification. Right? You don't get a reward every single time. So if you teach those things, it helps move you through those stages of morality and puts you in a higher level of thinking. So that's where you are morally. So we know where you are cognitively and morally. Now let's get into social development because for adolescents, definitely that is the most important. It's all about forming your identity at this stage in your life. All right. So your identity is your sense of self. The idea that adolescent's job is to find one's sense of self is through testing. You test out various roles in order to find yourself. This comes from next person we're going to learn about. Very important. Put a star by his name, underline it, circle it, highlight it, whatever. Erik Erikson. His stages of psychosocial development. So our changes in interactions and understanding of one another, as well as in our knowledge and understanding of ourselves as members of society. It's believed that a passage through the stages, through each of these stages, requires some type of resolution to a conflict. All right, and I'll get to him in a second. So some teenagers take this take an identity early on, and they do so by sharing their parents' values and expectations, and that becomes their identity as well. And then other teenagers adapt a negative identity, and they oppose society and oppose their parents' views, and they go along and conform to a peer group. Towards the end of your adolescence, something that you'll be focusing on is intimacy becomes a primary goal. All right. So first, let's go through Erikson's stages of development. All right, socially, not cognitively, that's Piaget. Socially. So, first of all, according to Erikson, from the time you're born to the time you're about 8 months old, you are concerned with trust and mistrust. Can you trust the world? Can you depend on others to meet your physical needs? Not just like biologically, but your need for love and attachment. If parents care and you become attached, you'll develop a sense of trust and predictability. However, inconsistent or lacking care will cause infants to develop a sense of mistrust and paranoia. So this mistrust, that's the conflict. This conflict, if it exists during this stage, has to be resolved and moved to trust before you can move on to the next stage. Okay? So to sum this up kind of in chart form, from birth to 18 months, an important event here is feeding, because how do you develop trust? You learn to trust who feeds you first, right? All right, infants form loving and trusting relationships with parents, and they also learn to trust or mistrust others during this time. All right, again, you got to solve that mistrust, solve that conflict in order to move into this stage, which is autonomy versus shame and doubt. So from 18 months to about the time you're 3. The question you're asking yourself here during this stage is, do I have some control over my life? If parents set boundaries, yet let children make some decisions, they will develop a sense of will or independence. Um, if overly restricted, children will be unable to assert themselves. Yet if parents are too lenient, children become overly demanding and controlling and will also have a sense of shame and self-concept. So basically, um, again, if you're having this conflict in the state in between the ages of 18 months and 3, so shame and doubt, you're not sure if you have control over your life, you can't really move on to the next stage of development until you've reached autonomy. where you have a sense of control and choice, independence. All right. So the main event in this that you do this is toilet training, right? So walking, toilet training, things like that. Those are all ways that during at least this age, up until the age of 3, you're starting to exert self-control. All right. And again, along with you need a healthy dose of shame and doubt. But until this conflict is really resolved, and you feel this total sense of autonomy, you're not moving on. But once you do, you reach this stage, initiative versus guilt, from the time you're 3 to about 6 years old. And you start asking yourself, am I capable of doing things myself? So now you know you have some control. Now you're really going to push it a little more and you want more independence. So you start using your imagination. It starts developing a lot more. You're a lot more curious, asserting your independence. Now, if parents react positively to you in this stage, you'll feel confident, take risks, and have self-confidence. If parents react negatively to you during this stage, children will lack self-sufficiency, have lower self-esteem, and tend to fear punishment because their parents reacted negatively to them trying to, go out and explore. They're curious. All right. So again, ages 3 to 6, independence is your key event. You become more assertive, take more initiative, and become more forceful. Industry versus inferiority. Okay. So again, this is the conflict you need to solve. You need to move from this to this in order to move on. Between ages 6 and 11. So now you're asking yourself, am I capable of doing things socially? So you know you're okay doing it on your own. Now can you play well with others? So you compare yourself with others in social and academic aspects. If you feel that you can do tasks and have a sense of pride, there you go. You fit in. But if you feel inferior and you feel like you're not as good as others, then you're kind of going to be stuck socially in this stage. Okay, so again, resolve that conflict, move to industry, also referred to as competence, but I think you'll see it most of the time referred to as industry. So again, from about age 6 to 12, school is a main event here. If you think about the age ranges, okay, that's basically where you develop this sense of industry or competence. A child must deal with demands to learn new skills while risking a sense of inferiority and failure. So you do have to take some risk, and you risk inferiority and failure, but you resolve that and you move on. All right. This is where you are right now. And see if this sounds like you. Uh, Identity versus role confusion. You're probably asking yourself in your adolescence, we said it's all about identity. So who am I? Where is my place in the world? You're going through the transition from childhood to adulthood, trying to discover who you are, what your strengths are, and what kind of roles you're best suited to play for your future. You have a sense of who you are and a commitment to future adult roles. So you're moving forward. However, if there's role confusion, confusion over what role you play can lead to unstable identity and an adoption of socially unacceptable roles. So again, you want to move from role confusion to identity. Find that identity. Find who you are. Pressures to identify with what you want to do with your life and the way you actually feel can be a bit overwhelming at times during this stage in your life. Um, you tend to, at this stage, want to separate yourself from your parents and really figure out what is you versus what is them. You tend to rely more on your peer groups during this time because you're trying to figure out, again, who you are, so you're trying to find that group of friends that fits you. It's a pivotal time period in your life. It paves the way for continued growth in the future, in your future development and your personal relationships. Erikson believed that you had to find yourself and figure out what role you played before you could truly feel and express love. So do you agree or disagree? Is this where you are? Is this what's going on? Again, that role confusion, by the time you're 20 years old, according to Erikson, resolve this conflict, you find your identity, and now you can move on to the next stage. Right? So to sum up, adolescence is identity versus role confusion. The most important thing in your life is peers. Right? At this stage, teens must achieve self-identity while deciphering their roles in occupation, politics, and religion. Finding yourself. All right. So once you've found yourself, you move on to this stage, 20 to between ages 20 and 30, intimacy versus isolation. You start asking yourself, can I love and be loved? You're pondering entering into very close, loving relationships, not just in a sense of romantic relationships, but even your friends, right? Your groups of peers start to change, right? You want more lasting friendships, right? You're going to go through your Facebook and everything and start going through a cleanse of people that you don't need relationships with anymore. You develop intimacy and a sense of connectedness. Or you run into the conflict and you develop isolation and you draw further into yourself and avoid close conflict. Right? So again, the goal is to resolve this isolation conflict if it's felt here and move towards intimacy. And that's just, intimacy is just developing strong, lasting relationships, whether romantic or platonic. All right, so this is your young adulthood. The most important thing is relationships. Um, the young adult must develop marriage-seeking relationships while combating feelings of isolation all at the same time. All right, next stage, generativity versus stagnation. All right. Now you found out who you are, you've developed long-lasting relationships. Now you need to know, are you productive and giving something back to the world? So the sense of making a difference through having children, a family, job, community involvement, and so on. So if you're happy with your life and feel you've made a difference and have a sense of accomplishment, you're here. All right, you're ready to move on. However, if there's a feeling of worthlessness or preoccupation with finding these things, you've hit kind of your midlife crisis, which that is stagnation. Right? So you have to get over that stagnation, get over that midlife crisis, move here, just like we've talked about with every other stage, in order to move on. So the age range is it's your middle adult years. The most important event to you during this time period is probably going to be parenting. You assume the role of parents, and that kind of signifies the need to continue uh, the generations while avoiding the inevitable feeling of failure. All right. Then you reach integrity versus despair. So basically, from that time you're retired to the time you kick the bucket. All right. Has it all been worth it? During these years of your life, it's going to be just a review back on your life. You look back on it, hopefully happily, with a strong sense of self-acceptance. Or you develop this sense of despair and you look back at your life with frustration, regret, and disappointment. And again, we don't want this, all right? We want, by the time, it's over, we want you here, okay? Not here, all right? So remember, resolve that conflict and everything will be good. So late adult life, life reflection, acceptance of one's life and accomplishment, and hopefully a feeling of fulfillment. All right, so that's it. We're going to go through activities dealing with Kohlberg and Erikson in class. So go ahead and take the quiz. Let me make sure that you have a good understanding of it before we move on in class. Okay, thanks. Bye.